Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are here today with a discussion on the political ideologies, specifically left wing ideology. Here, to start us off with, I brought up some information on the Overton window, which, if you haven't heard of it, that's okay. The Overton window is a range of policies from Wikipedia, by the way, that are politically acceptable to the mainstream population at a given time. It is also known as the window of discourse. Essentially, you have a topic and you move your Overton window up and down that side, one side or the other, left or right, to show how radical we are. Let me do this right quick. It's something else I forgot to look up. Thought I had everything, but it's taking a while. Can Overton window. Our Overton window tends to lean to the right as a society. Yeah. More or less, it's just there to help show where the ideologies of an individual or a group tends to lay. Yeah, the Overton window is an approach to identifying the ideas that define the spectrum of acceptability of governmental policies. It says politicians can act only within the acceptable range. Shifting the Overton window involves proponents of policies outside the window persuading the public to expand the window. So, yeah, things that at another time would have seemed unthinkable can be changed over time through the way we look through our Overton window. Like I said, it's more or less just the ideological way to view things. But typically, America has been further down here in the last few decades because of the pushback on communism, socialism, all the propaganda, everything. Fighting the ideological war on against the USSR. It's shifted much of America's ideology to the right. And so today, America's ideology tends to lean toward the right. But when you explain things straight out, more people are like, "Oh, I like that. That's and it's like, that's a leftist idea." So yeah, just to give us an idea of how things are often seen in America. left-wing politics in and of itself describe the actual range of political ideologies that support and seek to achieve social equality or egalitarianism, often in opposition to social hierarchy as a whole or certain social hierarchies. Left-wing politics typically involve a concern for those in society whom its adherents perceive as disadvantaged relative to others, as well as a belief that there are unjustified inequalities that need to be reduced or abolished through radical means that change the nature of the society they are implemented in. And we'll be looking at a number of explanations of this. According to Emeritus Professor of Human Development, Emeritus Professor of Economics Barry Clark, supporters of left-wing politics claim that human development flourishes when individuals engage in cooperative, mutually respectful relations that can thrive only when excessive differences in status, power, and wealth are eliminated. And one of the things they talk about here is, and something we'll kind of look over here, within the left-right political spectrum, left and right were coined during the French Revolution. We'll be going over it just a little bit, referring to the seating arrangement in the French Estates General. Those who sat on the left generally opposed the Ancien regime and the Bourbon monarchy, and supported the revolution, the creation of a democratic republic, and the secularization of society, while those on the right were supportive of traditional institutions and the Ancien regime. Usage of the term left became more prominent after the restoration of the French monarchy in 1815, when it applied to the independents. The word wing was first appended to left and right in the late 19th century, late 1800s, usually with disparaging intent, and left wing was applied to those who were unorthodox in their religious or political views. Ideologies considered to be left-wing vary greatly depending on the placement along the political spectrum in a given time or place. At the end of the 18th century, upon the founding of the first liberal democracies, the term left was used to describe liberalism in the United States and republicanism in France, supporting a lesser degree of hierarchical decision making than the right-wing politics of the traditional conservatives and monarchists. In modern politics, I've lost place where I was. In modern politics, the term left typically applies to the ideologies and movements of the left as classical liberalism, supporting some degree of democracy in the economic sphere. Today, ideologies such as social liberalism and social democracy are more critical of capitalism, are considered to be center-left, and the left is typically reserved for movements more critical of capitalism, including the labor movement, socialism, anarchism, communism, Marxism, and syndicalism, each of which rose... Nope, don't do that. each of which rose to prominence in the 19th and 20th centuries, 1800s, 1900s. In addition to the term, left wing has also applied to a broad range of culturally liberal social movements, including the civil rights movement, feminist movement, LGBTQ rights movement, abortion rights movement, multiculturalism, anti-war movements, and environmental movements, as well as a wide range of political parties. Yeah, often many of the groups that work to change things, to bring about changes in a society, often are on the left. That doesn't mean there isn't right-wing groups that make changes, but often when you're trying to achieve some form of betterment or equality amongst people, it's often left-wing. The left-right political spectrum. The left-right political spectrum is a system of classifying political positions, ideologies, and parties with emphasis placed upon issues on social equality and social hierarchy. In addition to positions on the left and on the right, there are centrist and moderate positions, which are not strongly aligned with either end of the spectrum. On this type of political spectrum, left-wing politics and right-wing politics are often presented as opposed, although a particular individual or group may take a left-wing stance on one matter and a right-wing stance on another, and some stances may overlap and be considered either left-wing or right-wing depending on the ideology. In France, where the term originated, the left has been called the party of movement or liberal, and the right the party of order or conservative. Some modern methods of mapping the political spectrum confine left and right to economic policy on the x-axis, while the y-axis for social policy, libertarian, authoritarian, which we'll get to a little bit later when we're looking at political compasses and other such tests. Now, let's go ahead and get to looking at some of the other things we mentioned. French Revolution. Yeah. Of course, this was when the French democracy was first taken down. French monarchy. With Marie Antoinette and I think it is Louis the 15th. Maybe 14th. There's so many freaking King Louis of France. I apologize if I get that wrong, but yeah, it was one of the King Louis that were way up there. I'm wanting to say it's like Louis the 14th or something like that. Anyway, that's not important. It's essentially that the people got so tired of living such a drudgery of life that they did eventually storm the Bastille, turn against the French monarchy, and it doesn't necessarily end the best with all the confusion and the bloodbath that goes on, but eventually France ends back up in a monarchy again under Napoleon Bonaparte, because he becomes emperor. And even though Bonaparte himself eventually is defeated, they still remained under a type of monarchy for a while, even through Napoleon III. So, yeah. But the French Revolution was inspired by the American Revolution because of our attempts to strike back at what we felt was unjust living under a king who could just do whatever, since we were just seen as colonies. We were subjects, but we weren't even given the full recognition of British subjects. And so, when he tries to tax us to pay for defending the colonies in the 7 Years' War or French and Indian War, whichever you prefer, they're both the same. That, along with the Intolerable Acts and a number of other things, eventually comes together to form the American, spur it into action. There were so many things, but Intolerable Acts were big. The attempts to make us pay for the French and Indian War, the Boston Massacre, and then, of course, on America's side, we were rowdy. The Boston Tea Party, there's a number of other things I'm trying to think of. But yeah, there was a lot of push back and forth. So, but it was even a leftist idea to have a revolution against the king. So yeah. Now, you get into more modern times, usually being on the left includes unions and labor movements. And not all labor movements are very peaceful, because sometimes they have to fight back. But yeah, Battle of Blair Mountain, one of the largest labor movements in the nation. In the West Virginia mine wars that culminated with a massive march of Union miners through the coal towns in the southern counties. The participants ultimately sought to free mines in Mingo County who had been arrested, miners in Mingo County who had been arrested and were being held on charges of violating the martial law the governor had imposed on the county. To get to Mingo, they had to cross through Logan County. Logan County is right across from Pike County, Kentucky. So we're looking literally at the border of Kentucky, West Virginia. To give you an idea where it is. Yeah. In late August of 1921, the Union miners encamped in the town of Blair, just below Blair Mountain in Logan County. And Blair Mountain forms a long ridge line that the miners had to cross in order to reach Mingo County. Their first order of business was to deal with Don Chapin, a notorious sheriff of Logan County whose main job was to protect the coal mine operators' interests. By the time the armed marchers arrived in Blair, Chapin had assembled his own army of civilian recruits that were protecting positions along Blair Mountain Ridgeline. It was on Blair Mountain where the two forces came face to face. Yeah, so he's Don Chapin, that sheriff, is protecting the mine operators' interest, the rich, those who are already in power. And what made the Battle of Blair Mountain the largest labor uprising in American history? Police Chief Sid Hatfield was a friend to the miners of Mattawan, West Virginia. Rather than arresting them when they got drunk and rowdy, he walked them home. For his allegiance to the unionized miners of southern West Virginia, southwestern West Virginia, rather than the nearby coal companies who employed them, Hatfield was gunned down on August the 1st, 1921, on the steps of the Welch, West Virginia courthouse alongside his friend Ed Chambers, as their wives looked on in horror. Their murder catalyzed a movement, the largest labor uprising in history that remains resonant to this day. The Battle of Blair Mountain saw 10,000 West Virginia coal miners march in protest of perilous work conditions, squalid housing, and low wages, among other grievances. Now, you think, squalid housing, low... What? Many miners in those days did not have the ability to often get out from under the oppressive foot of the coal company owners. They were usually set up in what were called company towns. They were towns owned and operated by the companies. And instead of really paying the workers wages, money, American dollars, like we would expect today, they used what was called scrip. And that was essentially saying, on your account you have so much available to spend. But the coal company bosses would make it so they could never quite escape the life of a miner. You know, you couldn't buy supplies and really get out easily. I mean, you could walk away, but you would have nothing. Because the scrip was not something you could take with you, like modern money. American money, or money of any other countries if they see something similar. The actual coal companies saw this as a way to hang on to the workers without having to pay too much. So it's like, you can buy this, but it costs you so much scrip. And so you could survive in the coal town, but it wasn't fun. They set out from the small hamlet of Harmont with the goal of advancing upon Mingo County, a few days' travel away, to meet the coal companies on their own turf and demand redress. They would not reach their goal. The marchers instead faced opposition from deputized townspeople and business people who opposed their union organizing. And more importantly, from local and federal law enforcement that brutally shut down the burgeoning movement. The opposing sides clashed near Blair Mountain, a 2,000-foot peak in southwestern Logan County, giving the battle its name. This is still something very much remembered around this area. Of the country. It's a huge moment. But again, this comes about because of unions trying to help people have better lives. As I already explained about the coal towns and stuff, life was not easy. This is when many of the rich and the powerful loved busting up unions and taking advantage of people. Often they would have the help of government, whether it was military or local police departments. We've also got the Colorado Labor Wars. The Colorado Labor Wars were a series of labor strikes in 1903 and 1904 in the state of Colorado by gold and silver miners and mill workers represented by the Western Federation of Miners. Opposing the WFM were the associations of mine owners and businessmen at each location, supported by the Colorado state government. The strikes were notable and controversial for the accompanying violence and the imposition of martial law by the Colorado National Guard in order to put down the strikes. Yeah. A nearly simultaneous strike in Colorado's northern and southern coal fields was also met with a military response by the Colorado National Guard. Colorado's most significant battles between labor and capital occurred between miners and mine operators. In these battles, the state government, with one exception, sided with the mine operators. You'll see this a lot if you look at the strikes and union movements in history. They often side with the rich, the powerful. Additional participants have included the National Guard, often informally called the militia, private contractors such as the Pinkertons, Baldwin Felts and Phil detective agencies, and various major entities, mine owners associations, and vigilante groups and business-dominated groups such as the Citizens Alliance. Two scholars of American labor violence concluded there is no episode in American history in which violence was as systematically used by the employers as in the Colorado Labor War of 1903 and 1904. The WFM as well embraced more violent strike tactics and entered into one of the most insurgent and violent stages that American labor history had ever seen. So, yeah. Again, we have workers trying to fight for better conditions, and it gets violent. Because the rich, they're like, no, you work for us, you do what we want you to do. Yeah. But beyond labor movements and unions, hippies were leftist. The idea of love, of peace, freedom. Think about it. All, almost all of what they pushed was very leftist. We want peace, not war. We want, love among people. We want the rights to do things. We feel we should be able to take drugs without being attacked by authority. So, yeah. Let's see. Hippies were somewhat associated with the counterculture of the 1960s, originally a youth movement that began in the United States in the 1960s and spread to different countries around the world. The word hippie itself came from hipster, which was used to describe beatniks who moved into New York City's Greenwich Village, in San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury district, and Chicago's Old Town community. The term hippie was used in print by San Francisco writer Michael Fallon to help popularize it. The origins of the term hip and hep are uncertain. By the 1940s, both had become part of African American jive slang and meant sophisticated, currently fashionable, or fully up to date. The Beats adopted the term hip, and early hippies adopted the language and countercultural values, and the Beat generation. Hippies created their own communities, listened to psychedelic music, embraced the sexual revolution, and many drugs such as marijuana and LSD to explore altered states of consciousness. I mean, think about that. They're just wanting to be peaceful, to, be sexually free, liberation, want to be able to listen to what they want to listen to, and one of the biggest things, they want to create their own community, which is often a very leftist ideology. The idea of communes. Yeah, you work to make life better, and you bargain with each other to help each other out. It's not a ideology that is without a definite leftist push. Very leftist, very libertarian. Another movement. we need to talk about that is very leftist. Occupy Wall Street. This was a much more recent one. 2011. People getting peaceful, sitting in, trying to influence people to realize that, hey, what these uber rich groups are doing is wrong. It was a left-wing populist movement against economic inequality, corporate greed, big finance, and the influence of money in politics. The motivations for the movement largely resulted from public distrust in the private sector during the aftermath of the Great Recession in 2008. There were many particular points of interest leading up to the Occupy movement that angered populist and left-wing groups. For instance, the 2008 bank bailouts and the George W. Bush administration utilizing congressionally appropriated taxpayer funds to create the Troubled Asset Relief Program, which purchased toxic assets from failing banks and financial institutions. The U.S. Supreme Court ruling in Citizens United versus FEC in January 2010 allowed corporations to spend unlimited amounts on independent political expenditures without government regulation. A very horrible decision. This angered many populist and left-wing groups that viewed the ruling as a way for moneyed interests to corrupt public institutions and legislative bodies such as Congress. But, again, you see it in right-wing news that they did their best to bastardize Occupy. They didn't like, we're trying to push back against the uber rich. We want a better America. The 99%, the majority of the people versus the 1%, the rich. I mean, the really uber fucking rich. But, yeah. The right wing propagandized this as, they're just using this as a chance to annoy people, to vandalize, to do this, to do that. And don't get me wrong, there are some stupid people in some of these movements that do stupid things. But you'll know the majority of the people in the movements are very peaceful. But some people don't care. They want to see any attempts to bring down the overtly rich and the system that keeps them rich from being attacked. Here we have an article talking about the Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street movement and 10 years later. Yeah, this is from The Guardian, 2021. Yeah. Some say it inspired BLM and the growth of the U.S. left. Yeah, well, there's another group we need to talk about, it, which is another leftist movement, BLM. Black Lives Matter. And that BLM was a decentralized political and social movement that seeks to highlight racism, discrimination, and racial inequality, often experienced by black people, and promote anti-racism. Its primary concerns were incidents of police brutality and racially motivated violence against black people, starting with the killings of Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Rekia Boyd, among others. The movement and its related organizations typically advocate for various policy changes considered to be related to black liberation. Yeah. So again, this is a group that the ideation was good. What they wanted to do was good. But again, what did the media and, especially right wing, but the mainstream media in general just bastardized this movement? Say, look at all the damage they're doing, all the violence. When the majority were not a part of that. Again, there's always those who do things to destroy movements. But it was another push to try to equalize things. Antifa. Many people are so scared of the name. They're like, they're evil, they destroy things. The name itself is shortened from anti-fascist. Anti-fa for fascist. Antifa. Yeah, it is a left-wing, anti-fascist, and anti-racist political movement in the United States, and it consists of a highly decentralized array of autonomous groups that use non-violent direct action, incivility, and violence to achieve their aims. So it can be anything from sit-ins, protest songs, or, it could end up all the way, which is what many people try to cry that is all they do. It is not violence. Most Antifa political activism is nonviolent, including poster and flyer campaigns, mutual aid, speeches, protest marches, and community organizing. However, some who identify as Antifa also use tactics such as digital activism, doxing, harassment, physical violence, and property damage. Members of Antifa aim to combat far-right extremists, including neo-Nazis and white supremacists. So, yeah. The American soldiers in World War II, you could definitely claim they were Antifa. They were anti-fascists. They were fighting against the Nazis, the fascist Italians. But again, the right wing and mainstream news do their damnedest to screw over these groups as being, they're all violent. They all want to hurt society. No. That is not true. But again, these are all forms of leftist movements, your unions, your groups like Occupy, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, hippies. These are all leftist ideologies. But they are often attacked and tripped up by the right wing and by even authority. You think of how many times certain groups or activists have been put on FBI watch lists, CIA watch lists. How many Nixon distrusted, and other presidents, but Nixon's the most notorious for this kind of action. But yeah, the ideas on the left, peace, equality, fairness, you know, it's these kinds of things, which I kind of laugh when someone says, I'm right wing, I believe in Jesus. Jesus would have been left. I don't know if you all realize this. He would have been very left wing. Because he believed in helping people. Yeah. It's ridiculous. But this is a look at the left-wing ideologies. To end this off with, let's look at some tests. I took these. These are political compass tests and different ways to kind of help judge your political ideologies. This is the OG, the old man of the political tests. The political compass test. This is my score. You have up is you are more authoritarian, down is more libertarian. This deals with social ideologies. Heavy police presence, strong military, dictator-like rulers. Libertarian, you have the right to do what you wish as long as it don't hurt anyone else. That's fine, you know. And then more on the economic scale, right wing and left wing. So again, this is where I landed. You have the right to do stuff, and there should be a level of equality. When it comes to economics, it shouldn't just be the rich people getting richer and screw everybody else. No, it should be helping people. Now, let's look at this. This is the political typology quiz. It says my best fit is progressive left, along with 6% of the public. Percent of the general public who are the different categories. You can go far right, which is faith and flag conservatism. Then committed conservatives, someone who's just like, I like them because they're conservative. Populist right, they deal more with the populist ideas, but that are more from right-wing ideologies. You have ambivalent right. It's like, I just tend to like more of these ideas. You have in the middle the stressed sideliners, 15% of the population, thereabouts. And then when you start slowly going left, outsider left, it's like, I kind of like more of these ideas. Then democratic mainstays, someone I was like, yeah, it's okay. I tend to more like these ideologies. Establishment liberals, and then myself, progressive left, is 6%. So yeah, and then you have quizzes like this. This is 10 groups. It's supposed to be a much more accurate because it really envelops so much more different ideologies. There's other tests like this out there. When I took the quiz, my closest match, classical Marxism. And it refers to the economic, philosophical, and sociological theories expounded by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels as contrasted with later developments within Marxism. And next matches I could have probably also been tied with Marxism, Leninism, Eurocommunism, Orthodox Marxism. But looking at the compass, yeah, it shows where I sit in each one. Excuse me. It's hard to see. Goodness. But yeah, they have the 4 squares. Image, put it up here, paste, 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 paste. Well, we'll do this. There we go. That's easier to see. We have general authoritarian. Let me make sure everything's visible here for you. General authoritarian in the north, general libertarian in the south. So this is much like the political compass test. Although this says I'm more up here, I'm still libertarian left, but I'm a little more authoritarian than libertarian, it says. Though I'm still very to the left. Now, looking at an economy, capitalism versus socialism, regulated or laissez-faire, just no regulations. I'm very much socialism, regulation, authoritarianism, libertarianism, democracy, autocracy. This is more in the social settings, political settings. I'm very much pro-libertarian and democratic. When it comes to nationalism versus globalism, particular versus universal, I believe in there are a level of particular rights, and it never hurts to have everything understandable within a global community. But I'm pretty centrist on it, as even more so than, yeah, it's one of the most centrist I have. It is the most centrist I have, so yeah. Now, progress versus tradition, Conserve versus reform. I sit on the reformist progressivism. Primitivism versus transhumanism. Transhumanism, all it is the idea that you can do things to make the body better, even if it requires something outside old school normal traditions. And then acceleration and technology deceleration. I sit at a transhumanist deceleration. I've got nothing against technology, but I still feel we need to test things out first. Punishment, rehabilitation, common law, civil law. I sit on rehabilitation based common law. You know, it shouldn't be all about, well, I'm going to punish you and that's that. No, it should be, we want you to re enter society, to be able to get your life together, to be able to be someone who fits in well with society. Monoculturalism versus multiculturalism. Equality versus hierarchy. I'm very much more for equal rights, and I tend to lean more on the multicultural. I mean, we're all people from different walks of life. Not everybody is the same or should be the same. Then we have transitional versus direct governments, and compromise versus persist in your ideologies. And I sit on the transitional and compromisation side. You must be willing to compromise with others, but it must be a government that's always willing to move, to transform. And politicized versus apolitical. Are you political or are you not? And moderate ideologies versus radical ideologies. I tend to be on the politicized radicalism. Then we have the a few little ranges here. We have collectivism and individualism. I tend to lean more on the individualism side. Although I'm very close to the center. Revolution or peaceful change. I sit very much on peaceful. Idealism versus realism. I sit more on idealism. And consequential versus deontological. I sit more on consequential. That's what it has me in that screen that for some reason, I had trouble seeing. Well, you also get axes. I tend to lean more socialism, more planned, more libertarian. I tend to lean more democracy. This is very close, but I think it's just a tinge more globalism, tinge more particular. I tend to lean more progress, tend to lean more reform. It's a tinge more decelerate than accelerate. I tend to lean more transhumanism. I tend to lean more common law, definitely more rehabilitative. Tend to lean more equality, more multicultural, more compromise, more transitional. This one's, I think, is pretty much down the middle, moderate versus radical, and politicized versus apolitical. I tend to lean more collectivism, tend to lean more peaceful, more realism, more deontological. So yeah, on those spectrums. But you can tell that's very different, the axes are, from the compass results it's got here. But yeah, we'll end that piece there. I just wanted to talk with you all guys about leftist ideologies. What you could even find out where you sit if you want to. But yeah, and I've known this for a while. I'm very much leftist. And don't get it wrong, Democrats are not leftist. I know I love people going, Joe Biden's so leftist. No. No. No, you've been given the brain rot if you believe that. He is a very moderate, moderate Democrat with some influence coming from people who are more to the left than him. I mean, in fact, he used to be right of center, even though he was a Democrat. And now he's just center. There's still that tendency to want to lean right for him sometimes, though. But yeah, I just throwing that out there. Anyway, this will be the end of this episode. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I will be putting links in the description box below the video, as well as the links for the test, so you can take them for yourself if you want. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.